Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming over here this morning. My name is Tony Martin. I'm the Sales Director at Wranx. Our platform improves performance of organizations quickly through customized, science-based digital learning. Our aim has always been not only to help organizations to implement effective learning and training programs, but to help them understand what works and why it works too, so they can continuously improve. As an example, we introduced techniques like spaced repetition to our platform long before they became standard within the industry. And by showing personalized bits of training, we optimize the time in between showing that information again, making this an individual learning journey for all learners on Wranx. This, of course, is aligned with the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, if you're familiar with that. Of course, many platforms across the industry have introduced similar techniques, and that's a good thing. Not only because it means that digital learning is always getting better, but because it pushes organizations like us to continuously innovate and improve. While better and better techniques for improving learning and knowledge retention continue to be adopted across the industry, one area where there remains room for improvement is assessment and evaluation. Ensuring that individuals can learn knowledge effectively is one thing, but showing whether that knowledge can be applied effectively in a practical situation, what longevity that knowledge has, requires very different approaches. In short, for learning to be worthwhile, it has to help a learner in their job, and it has to last. This means that metrics have to measure both the application of learning and knowledge retention over time. The problem is, traditional metrics for assessment and tracking are still widely used, and they rarely give an accurate reflection of how training impacts performance, how confident learners are in what they have learned, or how well training knowledge is retained over time. During this talk, I'll explain how metrics should be chosen to reflect the practical application of knowledge, and how digital assessments and evaluation can be used to give true insights about learning longevity. So, people are familiar with traditional assessment metrics. Please raise your hand if you've ever done a multiple choice test. Okay, there we go. And while they give an indication of how effectively knowledge has been learned, they don't necessarily show how well it might be applied in a practical situation. For example, a salesperson might be taught their company's sales process and be able to identify it from a group of 4 choices. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are able to remember it and put it into practice in a work context. Instead, maybe it's a case that we track sales performance. The problem with that, of course, is that sales performance is affected by a host of other external factors, meaning that training effectiveness may not be accurately reflected, for better or for worse. Even well-regarded training processes like the Kirkpatrick model don't necessarily ensure training effectiveness if they are not applied well. The answer, of course, is to track correlation between both metrics, with a positive correlation showing that training has been successful. But there is a third metric that not only adds weight to correlation, positive or negative, but it's a better indicator of training effectiveness overall. We have found that measuring a learner's confidence in their knowledge is not only a good way to test how solid their knowledge really is, but also provides a strong indication of how well a learner is able to put knowledge into practice. Learners are only fully confident, it turns out, if they feel they can recall knowledge that they have learned and understand how to use it in a day-to-day role. To look at it another way, a new learner may feel confident that they have understood the steps for a particular process, but if they are unsure how to carry out those steps in practice that could be reflected in their lower confidence. To measure confidence, we use a technique called certainty-based marking, or CBM. This works by testing not only a learner's knowledge of a topic, but how certain they are that the answers they have provided are correct. CBM is theorized by Tony Gardner-Medwin, a professor at UCL. Tony guided us with the correct way to implement CBM effectively at Wranx, and he explains the benefits like this. When set up properly, it motivates students to think carefully about whether they can see reasons for either sound justification or uncertainty about the answers they give in tests. It is particularly helpful as a study aid in self-tests, providing a stimulus and challenge, and a warning signal when misconceptions have arisen. But it is also clearly shown to improve statistical reliability and validity of assessment data. The basis of CBM is this. Multiple choice assessments are okay for testing learner knowledge, but when learners don't know an answer, they can guess it and potentially get the right answer, giving a false indication of accuracy. Adding CBM overcomes this by asking learners to rate how certain they are before they select an answer. By using CBM within assessments, you can measure levels of both competence and confidence. The marking system for CBM is weighted in such a way as to encourage a host of self-assessment, honest self-assessment, my apologies. This results in more careful consideration of assessment questions and provides a more reliable indication of learner competence. Of course, competence is no good unless it lasts. So a learner confidence is no guarantee that it will. As many of our peers will tell you today, too often it is the case that training and knowledge assessment are delivered as one-off events. Knowledge isn't permanent though, and it does need to be refreshed. The important thing from an employer's perspective is to understand what part of a learner's knowledge needs refreshing. Ongoing assessments is, therefore, not only necessary, but a way to ensure that training is delivered in a low-cost way. What's more, it's not only important to know what knowledge has been retained by a learner, but how that compares to what they knew originally. If knowledge is not improving as a result of training, then the training itself needs to be examined so it can be refined. For this, we use the assessment module assessment approach. This process begins by assessing a learner's existing knowledge to act as a benchmark. For those falling below the pass rate, spaced repetition training is then delivered over a given period, and upon conclusion, the learner is assessed again to determine their impact on their knowledge. Although this may sound like a simple approach, it is also a very effective one. On average, using the AMA approach, we've found that learners improve knowledge levels by 25 points from pre to post assessment. And by adding CBM into the mix, meanwhile, we see increased confidence with highly engaged learners improving by 38%, and even low engaged learners improving by 20%. The process doesn't need to stop there, of course. It can continue indefinitely with constant refreshing and assessing a learner's knowledge. It also does not need to be carried out over a set period of time. As data is gathered, it can be used to inform the type and frequency of training delivered for an individual. As an example, Tata Steel Europe, which is one of the largest steel producers in Europe and part of the largest steel manufacturers globally in Tata Steel. Its products are used for the likes of construction, infrastructure, automotive manufacturing, and engineering. They used this same approach. We began working with Tata Steel Europe after they restructured their account management practices. Along with a growing need for face-to-face interaction between customers and staff, this meant not only did they need new training content for staff, but new ways of delivering training too. Ultimately, learners needed to build their knowledge of the company's product to deliver high-quality customer service. But although Tata Steel Europe is headquartered in London, it also operates in the Netherlands. This meant that it had to be effective and efficient to deliver in both countries. Our content team created 9 custom modules for Tata Steel Europe, which were based on objectives in the company's learning strategy and included modules on topics like hot and cold rolled steel. We also gave them CBM assessments with real-time analytics that helped determine how successful product knowledge was being retained by learners and to identify areas of training improvement for each individual. We're fortunate at Wranx to have an excellent team in content and UX, so the platform always gets a very positive response from learners. Obviously, this is very important to ensure engagement, and that, of course, breeds success. The platform was well received by the Tata Steel learners and resulted in 97% of learners improving their knowledge from pre to post assessment by an average of 25%. In an assessment featuring only 30 questions, that's a huge amount and shows how powerful these techniques can be when they are used together. In fact, such was the success of the program at Wranx that Wranx formed, the basis of Tata Steel Europe winning the 2018 Steely Award for Excellence in Education and Training. This was presented at the World Steel Association. You may not have heard of the Steelies, or the World Steel Association for that matter, but in steel circles, they're both a big deal. Their CEO, who collected the award, was also delighted. Most importantly for us, this example shows what's possible when learning is rooted in scientific study and the impact it can have on organizations. That case study demonstrates how metrics can be tied to performance to provide an accurate indication of training effectiveness, and how learner knowledge can be effectively assessed and refreshed on an ongoing basis. More importantly, it also shows the impact that effective assessment and evaluation can have on the performance of a business. CBM provides an indicator of training effectiveness, while the assessment module assessment approach provides a platform to track ongoing performance. Together, the two techniques provide a robust means of delivery of assessment and evaluation. The techniques can be implemented in a variety of different ways. Organizations can develop their own approaches and processes for building them into training programs based on their own requirements, or they can make use of them in a digital learning platform like Wranx. If you're wondering whether your organization needs this sort of insight, it almost certainly does. Simply not having the insight limits what you can know about the effect of your training and how effective it is. It makes it more difficult to track ongoing performance and means you can't calculate the ROI of training. You have to ask yourself, is a simple tick box assessment enough to help you deliver the performance that you need? We certainly recommend that organizations make efforts to develop this sort of insight, however they choose to go about it. For those here today who are keen to get started, we're offering free evaluation of existing training approaches so that you can understand where you're at and what you might need to do to improve training effectiveness in your organization. Please sign up at our stand, which is directly behind you, or you can go to the URL which is presented on the screen. Thanks for listening to me today. I hope you found this session useful and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.